Welcome back once again to the Imaginary Gallery. TJ's here, and we are discussing cognitive distortions. And the one I've chosen for this particular evening from the same book, Feeling Good, by David D. Burns, MD, The New Mood Therapy, I've selected number 5, which is called Jumping to Conclusions. And I know there's another Toltec book, which is The Four Agreements, which covers this subject as well. But I learned this one first, and then I learned that one, and you can put them together. So we're sticking with the original source for the sake of this part of the series. So, for jumping to conclusions, and again, these are cognitive distortions, which means in our own lives, our own thoughts, our thinking in the ways I'm about to describe. And these ways of thinking are actually considered errors in thinking because they're not rational arguments, but we tell them to ourselves in our self-talk or in our minds when we're just thinking about things, and they can contribute to a bad mood, to depressed states, to feeling inferior. And the idea is to recognize these errors or these distortions, and when you find yourself thinking them, remember this lesson that you learned tonight here at the Imaginary Gallery. Because it is, I've experienced it where you do one of these things and you feel horrible, because you really believe it's true. I mean, you just think it's true, and it's allow yourself to realize when you are doing this and give yourself a break. So for the jumping to conclusions portion, the definition in this setting is you arbitrarily jump to a negative conclusion that is not justified by the facts of the situation. And he uses 2 examples of this. One of them is called mind reading, and the other he calls the fortune teller error. So, for mind reading, you make assumptions that other people are looking down on you. And you're so convinced about this that you don't even bother to check it out. Suppose you're giving an excellent lecture and you notice a man in the front row is nodding off. Well, the truth was he was up for most of the night on a wild fling. But of course you're not aware of this. So your brain will be thinking, this audience thinks I'm a bore. Suppose a friend passes you on the street and fails to say hi. Because he or she is so absorbed in his thoughts, he doesn't even notice you. You might erroneously conclude, he's ignoring me. He must not like me anymore. Perhaps your spouse is unresponsive one evening because he or she was criticized at work and too upset to want to discuss it. Well, your heart will sink because the way you interpret this silence is, she's mad at me. What did I do wrong? You may then respond to these imagined negative reactions by withdrawal or counterattack. This self-defeating behavior pattern may act as a self-fulfilling prophecy and set up negative interaction in a relationship where none existed in the first place. The other part of this jumping to conclusions is the fortune teller error, which is, it's as if you had a crystal ball that foretold only misery for you. You imagine something horrible is going to happen, and you take this prediction as a fact, even though it's unrealistic. And it says here, a high school librarian repeatedly told herself during anxiety attacks, I'm going to pass out or go crazy. These predictions were unrealistic because she had never once passed out or gone crazy in her entire life. nor did she have any serious symptoms to suggest impending insanity. During a therapy session, an acutely depressed physician explained to me why he was giving up his practice. He said, "I realize I'll be depressed forever. My misery will go on, and I'm absolutely convinced that this or any treatment will be doomed to failure." This negative prediction about his prognosis caused him to feel hopeless. His symptomatic improvement soon after initiating therapy indicated just how off base this fortune telling had been. Now he asks, do you ever find yourself jumping to conclusions like these? Suppose you telephone a friend who fails to return your call. After like an hour, you then feel depressed when you tell yourself your friend probably got the message but wasn't interested in enough to call you back. Your distortion is mind reading. You then feel bitter and decide not to call back and check this out because you say to yourself, he'll think I'm being obnoxious if I call again. I'll only make a fool of myself. Because these negative predictions, the fortune teller error, you avoid your friend and you feel put down. 3 weeks later, you learn that your friend never got your message. all that stewing, it turns out, was just a load of self-imposed hokum. Another painful product of your mental magic. So that's what he has to say on that one, which I understand this one because I've had those situations very similar to these, like when I was doing presentations in my college courses, or it wasn't a lecture, but I'd be giving the presentation. I remember being really caught up in what I was saying and worried and concerned that they might not like it. And after it was all over, I pretty much realized that those people in the classroom were probably not even paying any attention to what I was even saying because they're too worried about their speech and how they're going to say it, and then just like I was. But it's easy for us to think that, oh dear, I've got to speak in front of the class. They're going to think I'm horrible. And then if I do see one particular student who's like resting or sleeping or something, I'll think, I knew it. This is boring. I'm boring them. But then I get an A. So sometimes these things prove themselves to be distortions, but a lot of times we don't have that validation for it, so we just carry on as if it's true and make ourselves miserable, basically, based on erroneous information or our mind reading or fortune teller error. Now back to the example I mentioned regarding the mind reading, where I was giving the speech and really worried about what the class was going to think, when really all I should have been concerned about is what the teacher thought, because again, I was kind of doing things from this book without even knowing it, where you basically talk yourself into feeling better, because I was actually anxious. I was nervous and worried that, oh no, what if they don't approve? But then if you think about it further, I've never been to a class where anyone gave a speech, where anyone in the classroom said, that's horrible. They just sit there and listen. And when you think about it in a larger perspective, as far as, well, I'm just one student in a class of 50, so they're all going to have to do the same thing, so they're probably not even interested in mine. And it doesn't matter really what their opinion is because they're not giving the grade. So I would use such methods just to get through such stressful times, because other people probably don't care. They can just stand there and BS their way through the speech, which I knew one person that did and got an A, which was fun. But I took it seriously, and I was all worried and anxious and scared and nervous, and later, like maybe after the second or third one, realized, you know what, they probably don't even care. And the second thing, I learned a trick when you're giving a speech in front of a class, especially with a bunch of strangers. I've just learned, if you're in the classroom and their heads are all right in front of you this way, I've learned just to look at them, but don't look at them. Look at the wall right behind them. So you focus your eyes on the wall, but not too high, because then it will look like he's looking at the ceiling. But like in line with their heads or close to it, because they can't see exactly where your eyeball is. So I would be just like, I'm talking about this, and this is my speech, and blah, and I would be like looking all over, because they can't just stare at one portion and expect a successful speech because you're ignoring them. So you learn to turn your head, much like our presidents do when they give their speeches, because they have three different teleprompters, and they've got a little earpiece in their ear that says, "Look at the left," and I feel this way. Look right. Oh, and the people watching think, that's a different subject. ADHD.
Would you give me a break? I didn't count how many times you called me when I was gone. And I know I was busy, but I was trying to think. I was all by myself, trying to contemplate my new lifestyle. There hasn't been anyone else since you. I don't know why you're still so paranoid. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I shouldn't have come back. You're still the same. Oh, stupid me. I thought maybe we could work something out, but it's clear you're still the same jerk you always were. Don't ever talk to me again. I'm through with that. Ah! Well, I hope you're happy. Look what you've done to me. I'm ruined. I'm shape-shifting way worse than I'm supposed to. How dare you? It's your fault. How dare you?